Hi book lovers, welcome back to my channel. I have a video that I've been working on since March, April. You probably are wondering why I'm reading 2019 books, but that's because I was hoping to get this video up sooner than November 2020. I've been planning this video for a while now, finally finished the last two books on this TBR, which were all the hyped books in 2019 that I did not read, and me trying to decide whether they are worth the hype or not. I do hope to continue on with this kind of video every year, hopefully, not getting it up at the last 2 months of the consecutive year. But the books that I decided to read finally this year are mostly romances. There is one non-romance, but I just put it in here because it was one of the most hyped books from 2019. So I read Well Met by DeLuca, Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston, Marriage for One by Maise, and the last non-romance book, Daisy Jones and the Six. I actually read these two back in April or May, and then the last two like literally a week ago, but I did finally finish them all. I am probably missing a couple other really hyped books, but these were the four that I settled with. So the first book that I read was Well Met by DeLuca. This is the first book in a series, but complete standalone. The sequel actually released this year. I didn't read it yet, but this was a rom-com that got a lot of hype leading up to its release, mainly for the cute cover and also the fact that it was set in this Renaissance fair setting. It's enemies to lovers, it's a rom-com, and this actually worked out pretty well for me. I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was really sweet and adorable, nothing amazing or mind-blowing, but it was a good read, what I needed at the time. Not really laugh out loud hilarious like I would expect in a rom-com, but I did enjoy the main characters and the romance. It's set in this small town where the heroine relocates to take care of her sister who was in an accident. Emily is also there to take care of their niece, and in the small town every year there's a local Renaissance fair, and the school where the niece attends, they volunteer themselves to work at this Renaissance fair. So that's where Emily is roped into this whole thing. Her hero is one of the school teachers who is in charge of running the Renaissance fair. He is pretty gruff, pretty grumpy. Simon and Emily do not really get along when they first meet. Simon takes this fair very, very seriously because it's his family's legacy, and Emily does not. Emily is pretty much ready to get things wrapped up, help her family, and then move out of this small town. She's only there for the summer, but being around these people every weekend, helping them around, getting to know them a lot better, getting to know Simon so much better, she slowly starts to fall in love with this small town community. I really like these characters. I like Simon, Emily, all the secondary characters who are introduced to eventually get their own books. I'm most excited about Emily's sister April, but her book is not coming out until next year, 2021. But one of the reasons why this small town romance actually worked for me, because it does take a bit for me to fall in love with small town romances, is the whole Renaissance fair thing. That was really exciting, really fun, very different. I'm not really a Renaissance fair kind of person, but reading it was still really nice. It kind of spiced things up a bit from your typical small town romanciness, but it was a great debut. I gave it 4 stars. I have heard some not so good things about the sequel, so I may hold off on reading that one. So was it worth the 2019 hype? For the most part, I would say yes. The second book I ended up reading was Daisy Jones and the Six. I actually listened to this one in audio because everyone recommended that I read it as an audiobook, and I'm really, really glad I did because I know I wouldn't have enjoyed it as much. Well, not that I loved it, but I definitely would have struggled a bit more if I'd read it rather than listen to the audiobook, because the audiobook is 5 out of 5 stars. Like the whole cast, the narrations, that was fantastic. It was just the story itself that I had problems with. Daisy Jones and the Six I gave 3 stars. It was a kind of 3-star read where I both loved it and hated it. So to me that cancels everything out and just is a 3-star read. What I loved, the audiobook and the format of the book, which complemented really well with audio because it's in this weird interview biography style thing. I know if I'd read it I would have been really annoyed, but this full cast of narrators really brought this book to life. After I got into the story, I was able to pretty much recognize what voice was who. The concept of this book is pretty interesting. It's set many years after the rise of Daisy Jones and the Six, who are this rock band. They're being interviewed by this mysterious narrator who does get revealed at the end, and they just talk about and reminisce about everything that happened back in the 60s, I believe. So if you think about rock star kind of stuff, you think about drugs, sex, and rock and roll, and this book is pretty much all of that. But what I hated about this book was that I just did not care about these characters, especially Billy. I did not see why he was so special. I did not like our main male character. Billy is pretty much the leader of the Six, a rock star band. I just didn't see why two women were so in love with him, Daisy and Camilla, but these three main characters I just grew to not like. Billy, I pretty much wrote him off from the beginning of the book. This is not a spoiler, it's on the back of the book, it's in the blurb, but Billy goes wild while on tour and cheats on his newly pregnant girlfriend, Camilla, because he just could not deal with being a father, and the whole rise to fame was getting to him. But I just did not care about this guy from that moment on, and when you dislike one of the main characters in a story, it's kind of hard to fully enjoy a book. But the story is Billy and his band The Six go on tour with Daisy Jones, who is another rising star, and these two, Daisy and the band, they just catapult together to fame when they work on songs together, when they perform on tour together. I just did not like our main characters. The only character that I really did enjoy was Karen, who's part of the band, but everybody loves Karen. So did this book live up to the hype for me? No, it did not. It was sadly a bit of a disappointment because it seemed like everybody loves this book. I would still recommend this book, but only the audiobook. If you're a fan of this author, Taylor Jenkins Reid, you will probably end up loving this one. Her books are hit or miss for me, and this one was definitely a miss, but the audiobook is fantastic. The audiobook itself, 5 out of 5 stars. It was incredibly well done, and plus there's a little song, this bonus song at the end. You only get lyrics in the book at the end of the book, but they actually sing it in the audiobook. I thought that was really cool. So if you want to read this book and you're torn between like audio or ebook, absolutely go for the audiobook. And then I read Marriage for One by Maise. This is the one indie romance on my list, and probably one of the few really popular indie books from 2019 that I didn't read. I think this one also, along with the others, made it onto the Goodreads Choice Awards, like one of the nomination levels. This was very popular last year, very hyped, especially on Bookstagram. Some of my close friends absolutely love this book, so I read it and I gave it 3 stars. Sadly, this one also did not live up to the hype for me. I was really excited about this one because it is a marriage of convenience romance. There's a grumpy hero. My friends love this one. It should have been something that I ended up loving too, but my main issues were just the fact that the writing was not my favorite. Jack was a little bit annoying. At times it was a little bit boring, and it definitely didn't need to be as long as it was, which was over 500 pages. So the writing, it felt almost stilted to me. The dialogue definitely felt awkward at times. There's a lot of heavy dialogue too, which annoys me like crazy, where there's just pages and pages of them just talking. But that's a personal pet peeve of mine. It felt like the author was trying to make Rose a little bit too quirky, and I was really annoyed at the beginning of their marriage of convenience. They didn't even think about trying to appear like they were in love. They were so confused about everything, and I was just like, why didn't you look up how to do this in the first place? Maybe do a little bit of research before signing on a dotted line. Jack is a grump, yes, but he was so very hot and cold with Rose, and yes, their names are Jack and Rose after Titanic, but Jack got tiring pretty quickly. We knew from the beginning that he was actually into Rose, but I just didn't understand why he couldn't show that. Instead, he pretty much ignores her, is cold to her, but he does do a lot of sweet things like helping Rose out with her new coffee shop, so the progression of his character does get better. I also didn't really feel a chemistry between Jack and Rose all that much. Honestly, they could have just ended up being friends and I would have been fine with it. The romance, it just sadly did not work for me all that well, and I still don't really understand Jack's reasons for why he did what he did and didn't just try to woo Rose from the very beginning. There is quite a bit of manipulation, but I didn't really have a big problem with that. I just didn't really understand Jack's reasons for it. Stop it, baby. I really wish I could have loved this one more, but it was just an okay read to me. There were some good parts, but there were also some not so good parts. I really wanted the audiobook, but I settled with the ebook, and because the writing felt awkward to me, it was just an awkward read for me. I wouldn't say no to reading her again. I do own a couple audiobooks from her, but this book sadly did not live up to the hype for me. And the last book that I read is arguably the most hyped, the most popular new adult book of 2019. And that is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. I actually won this copy from Goodreads, one of the few times that I win something on Goodreads, but I have had this book for quite a long time and I finally ended up reading it. It is a new adult romance between a royal prince and the president's son. So a prince and the first son. It was pretty fitting that I finally ended up reading this in 2020, right after the elections, because there was quite a lot of politics in this one, but surprisingly I did enjoy the politics here. It was one of the few things that really had my attention in this book, so I gave this one 3 stars. I honestly had no clue how I would feel about this one before going into it, because there have been so many ranging feelings about this book. So many 1 stars and so many 5 stars, so I just went into this one with no expectations. I partly listened to this one, I partly read it. I mainly listened to it just so I could get through it faster. But I will say the narrator is not the best narrator. He just did not feel like he fit the voice of early 20-something-year-old men. Also, this book is told entirely in Alex's point of view. Alex is the first son, and I would have loved to see like a dual point of view with Alex and also Henry, the Prince of Wales. I would have loved to read this one also from Henry's perspective, but one of my big problems was that I just did not fall in love with Henry or Alex. It was a kind of read where I felt very apart from the story and from the characters. I just wasn't immersed into the story as much as I wish I could have been. I liked them for the most part and they were really cute together, but some things did drag a bit and I got a little bit bored with the two of them. So about the actual story, Alex and Henry are kind of frenemies. Alex sees Henry as his nemesis because Henry has always been so cold to him. He's a very uptight prince, very proper, and Alex is kind of the opposite of that. He's very easygoing, charming, and fun. So he likes to rile Henry up, but they get into a bit of a scuffle during a wedding and they need to fix their PR, so they pretend to be really good friends for the public and for the tabloids, and this is when they get to know each other better and grow closer and end up falling in love. But again, I just did not love them. I like them, but I just wasn't invested in their romance. I did really like this wide, diverse cast of characters. It did feel very millennial or like Gen Z. I'm kind of part of this age bracket, but I don't even know what I would call myself. But there are a ton of references to pop culture and it did get a little tiring after like the 5th reference. I can kind of see why this one blew up as big as it did. It is pretty new, at least in traditional publishing. New adult It's political. We have the first son and the Prince of Wales. The premise of this just sounds so good, but I just wouldn't say it executed all that well enough for me. This one is yet another 3-star read. 3 of the books that I read for this video were 3 stars. Only one of them was actually worth the hype, which was well met, and I feel like this one was probably the least liked compared to all the other ones. I do want to continue on reading more of Jen DeLuca. Probably will skip the second book because I just did not see good reviews for it. For Daisy Jones, Taylor Jenkins Reid is one of those authors where I feel a little bit sad that I don't love her as much as everyone else does, but there is some big screen production going on for this book, either a movie or a show, I don't remember, but that's a little bit exciting. I can't say that I'm overly excited for it, but I'm definitely going to be watching it whenever it comes out. Casey McQuiston has another book coming out next year, One Last Stop, which is an FF new adult romance. There's some time travel thing involved. It's based off of Kay and Leopold, but I'm not familiar with that. I am actually excited about that one though. I do really want to read it and the cover looks so cute. That is it for my video. I wish more of these books could have lived up to the hype for me, but let me know your thoughts on them. If they lived up to the hype for you, if you love them, didn't love them, let me know your thoughts. I will link all the books down in the description below. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you all next time. Bye!